Good afternoon, dear viewers. This is the Ruslan Belov channel, and in today's episode, we will analyze the situation in Ukraine as of December 5th, 2025. Over the past 24 hours, numerous significant events have been recorded, so I suggest we proceed directly to the analysis. Let's begin our review with the eastern Zaporizhia direction, where Russian forces are conducting offensive operations toward the village of Huliaipol. Apparently, the command of the Russian Federation, including the leadership of the troop grouping called Vostok, East, has concentrated virtually all available potential on the battle for this settlement. According to data received today, the Ukrainian side is transferring all available forces and reserve units to the city. Ukrainian military forces have been given a single objective: to maintain control over Huliaipol until the end of 2025. The task is formulated quite specifically. We're not talking about indefinite holding of positions. The task consists exclusively of not losing the city before the end of the current year. The Russian Federation, in turn, pursues the opposite goal: to completely clear Huliaipol before the arrival of the new year. Currently, this settlement is being shelled with all available artillery calibers in service with Russian forces. FAB aviation bombs are being used, FPV drones are employed, all attacks are aimed at displacing Ukrainian units. Tactics are being applied that are now called softening of Huliaipol's defensive lines, which should prepare the ground for a more intensive ground assault. It should be understood that ground operations are already underway, and apparently the Vostok grouping has collected and transferred all reserve forces from the entire eastern Zaporizhia sector of the front for the Huliaipol direction. To date, corrections have been made, please note, in the area of the village of Varvarovka. This is how the map looked yesterday, December 4th. Today, changes are being made to field zones based on video footage provided by the Ukrainian side. In these recordings, we observe Russian reconnaissance saboteurs moving through forest belt strips under fire from Ukrainian FPV drone operators. Based on these frames, we made the corresponding correction. On the other hand, today video materials also appeared showing that the Ukrainian side organized a counterattack in the Dobropilya area. And this, apparently, serves as the main confirmation that at the moment, the Russian Federation has concentrated forces from the entire Zaporizhia sector into a single fist, a powerful strike grouping whose task consists of rapidly breaking through the AFU defense on the Huliaipol sector, breaking the backbone of defensive positions in order to liberate the city in the shortest possible time. And naturally, this situation has led to the fact that in certain sectors, especially along Highway R85, at the moment there is likely a shortage of personnel. Today, from the Dobropilya area, Ukrainian sources are distributing this video recording, where we can observe two Ukrainian servicemen raising a flag in the area of farm facilities. That is, during the filming of this video, two flags were raised, one near the farms. The second flag was installed in the city, within the city limits. That is, based on these materials, we are accordingly making a correction. We do not consider this to be a full-scale counterattack by the AFU aimed at advancing toward the village of Velika Novosilka or restoring control over Vuhledar. Definitely not. These strikes are being carried out precisely with the goal of testing the strength of the Russian Federation's defensive positions under conditions when the main strike is currently directed at Huliaipol. At present, the Ukrainian side is trying to draw at least some reserve forces toward itself, especially in the direction of Highway R85. Everyone understands perfectly well that as soon as the Ukrainian side struck, possibly liberated the central part of Dobropilya, and if the Russian army now begins transferring resources and reserves here for stabilization, then there is a high probability that a significant part of AFU units will withdraw from this direction again, ford the Haichel River, and again take positions on the Ukrainian side of this river. That is, the goal, once again, is to draw out reserves accordingly to slow down the offensive operation in the direction of Huliaipol. We will monitor how the situation will develop in these days at present. But one thing is clear: a very fierce battle will unfold for Huliaipol. And I emphasize once again, the goal is to pass through this sector as quickly as possible. Next, let's move to the Pokrovsk direction, from where not so much news has been received over the past day. Perhaps the most significant footage comes from the territory south of Mirnograd, more precisely from its southern part. We will not demonstrate the video material. In these frames, we could observe drone strikes on Russian assault groups moving in the southern part of the city. Based on this video material, we made a small correction, repainting the grey zone in the southern part of Myrnograd in favor of the Russian army. From the northern part of the Pokrovsk pocket, a photograph was published, a panoramic shot, so to speak, from the area of Highway T-0515. In this shot, we can see at least 15 units of armoured vehicles of the armed forces of Ukraine that were destroyed during battles for the city of Pokrovsk and Myrnograd. On the other hand, it should also be noted that at the moment the Russian army is reducing the pace of advance on the city of Myrnograd. The city found itself in complete encirclement, and the Russian army does not seek, apparently, to clear it through direct assault. At the moment, the Russian army is trying to act exclusively through aviation forces, exclusively through aviation bomb strikes, with the goal of forcing Ukrainian formations to leave the encirclement or attempting to convince them to capitulate. But the ground operation, as we observe, the pace of the ground operation, as we see, has decreased significantly. Next, let's move somewhat north, towards Sofiivka, as well as Toretsk. Today we made a small correction on the map based on publications of various cartographic services. According to pro-Russian sources, over the past day the Russian army managed to clear most of the territory of Sofiivka. Perhaps in the near future, the Ministry of Defense will officially confirm this information. Also, the Russian army consolidated in the southern part of the settlement of Toretsk. That is, here, as we observe, combat operations are approaching a certain logical conclusion. Next, we move to the most important and probably most interesting direction, not only for the past day, but also, most likely, for the past week. Today, on the Kostiantynivka direction, the main events are unfolding somewhat northwest of the settlement of Chasiv Yar. From this sector, as you can see, the main corrections are coming. Let me remind you that the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation first reported on this direction back on December 1st. Then, like a bolt from the blue, the Ministry of Defense reported that the settlement of Klinov was cleared by the Russian army. But at the same time, no video materials or video evidence were provided, and naturally questions arose then. How should the map be corrected in this sector? Since between Klinov itself and Verolyubivka, more precisely, between Klinov and Russian army positions, there are a large number of various settlements. How did Russian forces manage to clear this village? But everyone more or less made some corrections, some generally ignored this message. Well, and we continued monitoring the chronology of events. And now today and yesterday, new publications began appearing regarding the situation in the Klinova and Verolyubivka area, which is north of Kostiantynivka. For example, today information is coming in that Russian units managed to almost completely clear the settlement of Verolyubivka. This information was distributed today by a number of pro-Russian experts. Based on this report, we made a correction and basically thought that this would be the end of the story. However, literally a few hours later, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation reported that the troop grouping called Yug, South, managed to completely clear the settlement of Bezimen. This is the village of Bezimen, which is located northwest of Chasiv Yar, or north of the settlement of Kostiantynivka. And here the question arose again. How should the map be repainted? Popasne, Verolyubivka, the railway line are still here, but based on the fact that several days earlier, information came about the clearing of Klinova, we still came to the conclusion that Russian units bypassed Verolyubivka, consolidated in Klinov, and then struck in a southern direction and cleared Bezimen. This is how the map currently looks north of Kostiantynivka, based on reports from the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, in the absence of any video materials that could somehow, so to speak, confirm anything. But in any case, the situation at the moment is maximally catastrophic for AFU units, if, of course, the information and the map, more precisely, its configuration that you see before you, is accurate and corresponds to the situation that is currently developing on the ground. The fact is that the settlements that have come under control or are about to come under control of the Russian army are located in close proximity to the main supply road toward Kostiantynivka. This is the highway, road N20. At the moment, the distance is 4 kilometers, and the presence of two settlements located along the railway line creates a reliable bridgehead, and accordingly reliable control over this road. Supply, apparently, in the near future for AFU units will begin to suffer, and suffer very severely. Also, based on this configuration, it can be assumed that already in the near future, the Russian army will be able to completely clear both the settlement of Popasn and Vyrolyubivka, and advance, possibly, further toward the settlement of Izhivka. If Russian units manage to take control of the settlement of Izhivka as well, and possibly even advance further toward Osikov, then this will already be complete encirclement of Kostiantynivka, with minimal, so to speak, losses and costs, including for the settlement itself. West of Kostiantynivka, there are a large number of lakes and various reservoirs, which will also complicate the supply of the AFU garrison precisely along the line Kostiantynivka, Dolha Balka, Nikolai Pole, and further west toward Raiske. Here it will be very difficult to carry out this logistics and supply of the garrison. Therefore, from this sector, a complete collapse of the defense of the armed forces of Ukraine in the Kostiantynivka area may actually begin. We will monitor how the situation here will continue to develop, but I would like to remind you that, according to the commander of the Yug troop grouping, the city of Kostiantynivka, more precisely its large main part, according to his words, should be cleared, and will be cleared approximately by mid-September. That is, within the next 10 days, we will see grandiose corrections in the Kostiantynivka area. Up to 60% of the settlement may be repainted, if, of course, what the commander of the Yug troop grouping spoke about happens. Next, let's move to the Siversk sector. Here there is a small correction on the eastern outskirts. Today, pro-Ukrainian cartographic services are making corrections, large ones, in the quarry area, the area of the settlement of Siversk, and also approximately 70% of the settlement of Siversk is already in the grey zone. The armed forces of Ukraine, according to the latest update from pro-Ukrainian cartographers, only the westernmost part is under AFU control, the part that is located on the Ukrainian side of the Bakhmutka River. That is, in the near future, Siversk will definitely fall. It's only a matter of time, apparently. On the Lyman sector, the main events are unfolding in the area of the settlement of Drobyshev. Over the past few days, the Russian army managed to block Drobyshev from supply from the direction of Yarova. Also, Russian units managed to block the city from the east and northeast. And the Ukrainian side, during these 24 hours, attempted to somehow unblock Drobyshev in order to restore control and supply. Speaking of Yarova, these frames were published by the Ukrainian side, and in these frames we can observe how Ukrainian SSO, Special Operations Forces, apparently are conducting a counteroffensive, a counterattack with the goal of clearing the southeastern part of Yarova. These events that you can observe on your screens took place precisely at this point. This video material gives us reason to believe that the territory to the east and northeast, up to Novoselivka, is under Russian army control. Also, Russian units managed to clear and take control of a large strongpoint located in the northeastern part of Drobyshev. This is how the map looked yesterday, December 4th. Today, based on a large amount of material, we are making this correction. That is, we see that Drobyshev is being taken in pincers, and there is a high probability that this turning point in combat operations for this village has already occurred. After Drobyshev, the city of Lyman itself will inevitably begin, where combat operations are also already ongoing in the east and southeast. Next, let's move toward the settlement of Kupiansk, from where a large amount of important news is coming. Let me remind you that several days ago, when Zelensky went to France, he stated that Kupiansk is under the control of the armed forces of Ukraine. And even some cartographic services, apparently based on Zelensky's statements, made rollbacks and corrections. We then ignored that publication, considering that, apparently, there was no counterattack, and everything that happened was a media action with the goal of somehow strengthening, enhancing Zelensky's positions at negotiations in Paris. However, today, December 5th, a video was still published from the central part of Kupiansk, from the area of Sadova Street. These are the frames. Here we can also observe how Ukrainian assault groups are conducting clearing of this part. The Kupiansk brewery, apparently, its territory. And these frames were geolocated. An 8-minute video was recorded that shows free movement of Ukrainian soldiers in this part. Based on these frames, as well as based on publications of various cartographic services that were made earlier, we still made a correction, and indeed there is information on the network that confirms that the armed forces of Ukraine have indeed gone on the counteroffensive. It's difficult to say what the goal of this counteroffensive is: to completely clear western Kupiansk, or merely to strengthen Zelensky's negotiating positions. And perhaps during this period, the Russian army decided to withdraw slightly in order not to suffer unnecessary losses. Perhaps already today, the Ukrainian side withdrew from this part of the city, because there is no acute need as such for any negotiations between Zelensky and any Western politician at the moment. That is, there is no need to prove to anyone that the front line is under control. Therefore, there is no need to organize all these counterattacks. On the Vovchansk sector, the Russian army is gradually advancing in the area of the settlement of Vilcha, as well as Lyman. Today, a video was published of how Ukrainian FPV drone operators strike positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in this part. Apparently, we will be making a correction in this direction already in the next few hours. And that's all, dear friends. The Ruslan Belov channel reminds you that we condemn any violence in the world and call on all sides to begin immediate negotiations and resolve all problems through diplomatic means. Thank you for watching, subscribe to the channel, leave your likes, and all the best to you.